Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. If this is your first time here on my channel, I'm Mark. It's nice to have you here. I recently added this huge new tool to the shop, and we'll get into that into a different video. There's a lot to go over there. But what matters is that this has displaced my x-carve. The x-carve used to live back in that corner, but I needed a little bit more space around here. So now I need to come up with a place for this, and I think I have a really cool idea to help get this thing up and on that wall and out of the way, but it'll be really fast and convenient to get it down and back into operation when I need it. So this is going to be a little bit of an experiment, but I think I can pull it off. While I was trying to figure out how I was going to pull this off, I started looking at Rockler's ceiling track system. Now, first of all, this is not sponsored by Rockler, but they liked the idea enough that they sent me some of their components to sort of play with and see if I could figure this thing out. Their ceiling track system is basically a piece of PVC channel that you have these different adapters and stuff that slides into it, and this gets bolted into the ceiling, and you can track electrical cords and lights and dust collection and that kind of thing with. Now, I said PVC. PVC isn't exactly a strong material. You know, you maybe could go with aluminum channel or steel or something like that, but this doesn't need to be that strong. All it has to do is guide the x-carve up and down the wall, keep it from tipping and folding away from the wall. There's really no weight that's going to be supported by these things themselves. So, to start figuring out how I was going to make this work, I just picked the height where the base of the x-carve would be just a little bit above that and started screwing this to the wall. I mounted the bottom and then I leveled the rest of this up, and I started playing with how do I get these little adapters to function correctly. So I put together a test board. That's what this looks like. I figured, okay, let's pretend this is the front of the x-carve, this is the back that's up against the wall. If you put this in there, and it sits there on sawhorses or something, and when you want it to go up, it just starts sliding up. The problem is you get to a certain point and it can't fold down the rest of the way. So that's obstacle number one that we have to sort out. From the other end, let's just pretend we have this sorted out. You have the rollers sticking straight out the bottom. And as it comes to a close, you just guide those in there, and it slides straight up the wall. Okay, I like that quite a bit. I just have to solve the pivot point issue, which I did. So I made this little T-bracket that moves the post from directly in line with the board down below it a little ways. And this dimension is actually narrower than the cutout in the channel. So now, if I put that in there and start sliding it up and we reach the point that we need to start tipping, that T-bracket slides into the channel, then you can guide the bottom bearings in, and the whole thing just wants to go straight up and down that. And it can't come out, it can't come out, and that's the only weight that this is going to be holding. I can slide this up, or I can pull it up from the top with a winch, which is the plan, and that stays nice and close to the wall, and I can slide it all the way up to the ceiling if I want to. And I want to. So now that I have the how figured out, I need to do a few things. I don't know that I want this bracket to be made out of 1/2-inch plywood, because even though I said there's not a lot of strength required, I feel like that narrow little bit with that bolt going through it is just not going to be strong enough long term. It's probably going to get bounced around and broken. So I'm going to make this bracket out of steel, and then I have to figure out how to get that mounted to the x-carve itself, and maybe stiffen up the frame of the x-carve so that when it goes up and down it doesn't want to warp and bend a little bit. So next I need to cut out these brackets. After that I need to figure out how to stiffen and attach the brackets and all of those different pieces of hardware to the x-carve itself. Immediately ignoring what I just said about making a steel bracket, I made a pair out of 3/4-inch plywood to save time and keep testing this idea. To strengthen the deck of my x-carve, I glued a few spacers between the aluminum tracks on the underside of the wasteboard. Then, I attached a strip of plywood spanning the entire width of the machine by drilling through the top and the spacer blocks and into the plywood, sandwiching everything together. I would have just covered the entire bottom of the machine with a single piece of plywood if I had had one on hand. But I wanted to avoid a trip to the store, so I used these strips in the front and back instead. Looking back, this added plenty of rigidity and probably saved me a bunch of weight, so I wouldn't change it now.
On the front, I drilled straight through and threaded on the bearing guides, which look like a cute little pair of robot legs. Then, on the back, I made marks perfectly in line with the front bearings, then lined up my T-brackets and attached them to the back face. I mounted the first track to the wall and made sure it was plumb. Then I mounted the second one, making sure the centers were exactly the same distance apart as the guide bearings. With the gantry in the front left corner, I wiggled a beam around underneath the X-carve until I found its balance point. Then I moved the gantry side to side just a bit to get a feel for how much tolerance this balance had. This balance point is important because I wanted to lift the whole thing straight up with an electric hoist, and if I pull from too far to either side of the balance point, the machine will rack and the guides will bind in the track. To hang the hoist, I didn't have anything solid enough in my ceiling to tie into in the location where I needed it. So first, I made this little corner shelf, then attached the hoist with bolts through the top of it. Then I positioned it over a stud in the wall and ran some long screws into it. Those screws will take the majority of the operating weight, but I ran a bunch of screws into the surrounding wall and ceiling to help out and prevent the shelf from twisting when it's under load. I installed a large eye bolt through the machine right at the balance point, then clipped the hoist into it. Then, it was time to see if this whole contraption would actually work.
Hey guys, it's time for an update. I was able to get this thing to go up and down the wall a couple of times. The hoist has more than enough power to do it. It moves pretty smooth. It folds into the grooves like I had planned. All that's going pretty well. It was a little bit cumbersome, a little bit awkward to try to line things up. I don't have my tracks set far enough apart to fit any of my good sawhorses in between it. And that means the wheels that are sticking straight down on the front are kind of getting in the way. And so one thing I need to fix is just spread the footprint of the tracks out. The other thing I'm going to do is make another one of these. Now here's the thing. They line up so close, but I had this one just the last time I tried it catch just a little bit and twist sideways and snap that off. So I said earlier I was going to make these out of steel. I went ahead and made them out of wood, thinking this is faster and easier to keep testing my theory with, and then maybe I'd go to steel later. As of right now, I'm thinking I'm going to stick with wood because if it's going to fail, at least it fails in something cheap instead of bending up my frame or wrecking something a little bit more serious. So maybe in the future the final version will be steel, but I'm much happier having this break than something more expensive. So we're going to move the track over, we're going to get another one of these on, and then I think we're going to be really getting somewhere. So imagine that this is upside down and this is the bottom of the track up against the wall. Because of these hard, flat edges, it's basically flat face. If you're off by even a little bit, the wheel catches and causes it to either rotate or break off like that first bracket did. So what I'm going to do is bevel the inside of this with a trim router, and that's going to open up the mouth of this by almost a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch and buy me a lot more room. So hopefully it'll funnel this thing in there. Even if I'm off center, it'll slide in instead of tipping in or breaking off.
In addition to beveling the tracks themselves, I added these strips to the wall as another sort of small funnel to help guide the bearings and hopefully keep them from catching on anything ever again.
Well, at this point, I have it completely operational and I'm really happy with how it turned out. It definitely took a little bit of trial and error to figure out the technique that I needed to get this in and out of operation easily. Once I had that figured out though, it's pretty smooth. I did make a couple of modifications. I raised the tracks up just a little bit from the lowest point that they were because I found that originally I wanted to keep it hooked into the track. The back bearings would be hooked in and I'd never have to detach it from the wall. Turns out with just the way it sits on the sawhorses, that wasn't going to be an option. So instead of having to lift up the front end to drop the back bearings out, now I can just lower it all the way down and it's already out of the track. So those got lifted up and I ran them all the way up to the ceiling. That way now when this thing goes all the way up, there is a safety mechanism on the top of that winch, that hoist, so that when the red, can't see it here, when this red little puck here trips the trigger up there, it shuts it down and you can't keep lifting it up any higher. That way I don't run my bearings into my ceiling. So it's nice to have all the height that I can possibly have, but that sort of safety reassurance. So let's run it up the wall and we'll take another look at it. I also added this cord, and this is part of the technique for getting it up and down off of the wall. First thing you got to do is just shove it all the way up against the wall. I do have my lines still drawn on the top of this, so I can see from back here that it's already lined up, but I kind of like to just make sure the bearings are already in line. It's gonna go. Then I just start lifting it up and it just starts sliding, and it's sliding along these rails. I really like these Craig sawhorses, but you can get sawhorses with channels in them that are meant for 2x4s. These clearly aren't 2x4s. They are aluminum extrusions, the exact dimensions of 2x4s. These are a product called track tubes. I've had a couple of them. I really like using them. They stay straight and square, which is way better than a 2x4. But when it comes down, it runs into those, and I can give a little tug on my cord here, and I get the front edge to just start sliding. So if I want it to come down, I just slide it down. But as it's going up, it just drags along these tubes and hits the wall, and I'm pulling on the cord so it doesn't just slam against the wall. Let it down and keep going. And just like that, it runs all the way up the wall, hits the brake and stops. And then I also added these kind of safety reassurances. It's just an old door hinge that flips out, and this way I'm not just counting on that hoist to hold the entire weight of the thing. These safeties, if that lets go, will still hold it. Yeah. So at this point I can put the sawhorses away, and I can have this much more room to work on projects and store tools and stuff. I do have a plan for a mobile sort of sanding cart that's going to store my stationary sanders that have been in storage since I moved in. And that'll probably get pushed right up against here, and then when I need the X-carve, I can roll that away, bring out the sawhorses again, and drop this back down. All I have to do is get my tracks just in line on the inside of there, and I'll probably put tape on the floor where the back feet of this sawhorse need to go, so I can set it up pretty quickly. And then when it's time to get into action, you just flip the safeties, grab the cord, grab the remote, and run it down. And I've been given just a little bit of a tug on the cord until it came loose. Now it's pivoting. I'll lift up and I'll keep running it down, and then it hits the track, and now I can kind of choke up on the cord a little bit. Keep pulling on the cord while it's coming down. And just like that, it's flat. I give it a little extra slack with the remote. It's now just free sitting on here. I slide it out, and I can slide it out as far as that, and then the eye bolt catches on the back side of the sawhorse, and that's how I know it's right where it needs to be. And then, like I said, these Craig sawhorses are really nice. They're super stable. So for what I'm gonna need it to do, that's a pretty solid setup that I can get in and out of action in a hurry. So anyway, that's about all I can think of to say about it. I'll leave all the relevant links to tools and products and everything that you might have questions on. If it's something you want to find and do your own research on, I'll leave links down below. And at this point, I feel like I've rambled enough. So thank you guys for watching. And yep, that's it. See you next time.